الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم, which means, O Lord, glory be unto you. We do not have any knowledge except that which you have taught us. Indeed, you are the all-knowing, all-wise, and there is no power or authority except that which is coming from you, the exalted, the great. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And very good evening to all our distinguished guests, particularly those representing different religions and different denominations. First of all, I must express my gratitude to our gracious host tonight for bringing us together in this very important occasion. Yang amat berhormat Datuk Sri Diraja Dr. Zamri Abdul Qadir, and of course his gracious wife, members of the committee, members of KADIR, Tan Sri, Datuk Yang Berhormat, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for this great honor that you have conferred upon me tonight. I feel very honored and privileged indeed to stand before you, and I feel overjoyed when I was informed by the Yang Berhormat that there would be people coming from different faiths and different religions, because this is a kind of audience that I look forward to in our country, this multiracial, multi-religious country. I think just as I would like to impart to you some of my understanding of what Islam is all about, I also look forward to learning something about other people's religions. And I wish again to express my gratitude to Datuk Sri Diraja for coming up with this idea. I think this is indeed a very important idea, and perhaps it is appropriate to embark on this kind of intellectual discourse that cuts across religious affinities. As he said, we are living in an era of uncertainty, era of turbulence, and era of tribulation, and it's high time that we benefit from each other's knowledge and wisdom, so that together we can make a better world for everybody to live in. The title of my paper is actually "The Heart of the Problems is the Problem of the Heart, an Islamic Spiritual Perspective of Contemporary Civilizational Crises." I need to explain a little bit about this title. I thought about this title a couple of years ago. And then I was looking in the internet, and I discovered that Pastor J. John, or Reverend Canon, who lives in Sholywood, Hertfordshire in England, had already used this expression, the heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. And so I thought, I do not want to be plagiarizing his idea. It's a pure coincidence. I was thinking about it, and apparently he had already talked about it earlier than me, and so I have to, I acknowledge and see the book. My acknowledgement. Yeah, on page 3, in the footnote. some of you are not used to footnotes, especially politicians. But for academics, the footnotes are very important. Not all politicians, I mean. So, lawyers, academics, very concerned about the footnotes. I've explained here, so that I won't be accused of plagiarizing, just to make the point clearer, I have given some heading to it, an Islamic spiritual perspective of contemporary civilizational crisis. Because I would love to know about other people's on this issue. I've tried a little bit research to see what other religions can offer on this subject. I'm very, very excited to know that so many commonalities as far as this concerned, topic is concerned. Now, given the time constraint, and of course I look forward to the Q&A, benefit from your wisdom, inquiries, commentaries, corrections, whatever I can benefit from. So perhaps I will try to finish my presentation, say, hopefully by 10 o'clock. Perhaps the moderator can indicate to 5 minutes before time when I should start. Okay? So I don't want to detain you further. And I was saying to someone just now that you might, somebody said, I want to learn from you. I said, I don't think you're going to learn anything from me, but one thing you can be sure, you can go to sleep. After this delicious vegetarian meal, and I told our colleagues at the table, and I had stayed in a Buddhist monastery in Taiwan for 3 days and 3 nights, and that was my first exposure to vegetarian meal, and also the chanting of the sutras. 4 o'clock in the morning, you have all the monks chanting in that monastery, and that was the first time for me. And my colleague and my roommate was a Theravada priest from Thailand. So we learned from each other. And of course, my second exposure to vegetarian food was in Japan. There I stayed again for 3 days in a Japanese temple in Kyoto. The good thing about Japan is the vegetarian meal was more appealing to me than the Taiwan one. And I think it's because it's drier. The Taiwan one is a bit oily, but the one in Japan was drier, and the shrimps really, it tasted like shrimp, although it was vegetarian. Anyway, we're not going to talk about food, we're going to talk about the heart. Now the thesis that I am sharing with you tonight is that we are living in a world of crisis, and we know that this crisis is now becoming global. Global warming is unprecedented, climate change is unprecedented, the economic crisis and scandals of the last decade were also unprecedented. These are all big things exploding in our society, in space and on Earth, and all these are symptoms of a greater crisis at the level of human civilization. And I would be the first to say that there are economic reasons for the crisis, there are sociological reasons for the crisis, there are cultural reasons for the crisis, legal and so on. And I'm not denying the importance of looking at this, at the crisis from those perspectives, the structural perspectives. But I would say that one cannot ignore another source of the crisis, which is perhaps deeper and more profound and less tangible than the structural, economic, political, legal, cultural causes of the crisis, and that is the spiritual heart. And so I thought we need to address that issue, and that's where I thought we could learn from each other, because all the great religions in the world talk about the heart, the spiritual heart. And this is, I thought, this is something that we share in common. That I think all religions believe in the heart as the, as you might say, the emotional, the cognitive, or the intellectual, and more important, the spiritual center of man. And that's where we need to address, and I thought that in the near future, if you're talking about sustainability of the environment, sustainability of the world, sustainability of our culture and so on, we need leaders who are imbued with this kind of spiritual consciousness and try to build institutions that will promote this kind of holistic development of individuals. Just to take you through the paper very quickly, before I come to the important part about the heart. On page 1, I talk about the deepening global crisis of contemporary civilization, and I recognize and realize that there are many scholars in the West who have been addressing these issues, albeit from different angles. But if you bring them together, then we all agree that there is a great civilizational crisis in our midst. I benefited from Dr. James Martin, who came out with a book on the meaning of the 21st century, a vital blueprint for ensuring our future. And James Martin started a center in Oxford to look into the future of the world. And then on page okay, I don't think I can refer to because my paging is different from this one. So let me just go to my text. This is about the concern of Western scholars, intellectuals with this crisis. And the names of these scholars and intellectuals are given, and they are like Robert Bellah, Joseph Stiglitz, Paul Krugman, William Easterly, Jeffrey Sachs, Lester Brown, Lester Milbroth, James Martin, Theodore Roosevelt Malloch, Jordan Mamoski, Noam Chomsky, Immanuel Wallerstein, Hans Kuhn, and John Diggins, among many others. I have benefited from their critique, their analysis, and their observations. And I've also looked at this International Schiller Institute, which came out with this website called A New Paradigm for the Survival of Human Civilization. And a political activist in America, Diane Sayre, came up with a very important statement that I share with her. Human civilization, she says, is currently threatened by direct crises in modern history and ongoing disintegration of the world economic system, leading into a threatened thermonuclear confrontation and deepened by cultural degeneration. A shift to a new paradigm, a shift to a new paradigm is the only way forward. This paradigm shift must address the axioms underlying today's catastrophic policies and must be as fundamental as that axiomatic shift which moved European civilization out of the Middle Ages into the modern times with all its breakthroughs in natural science and classical artistic composition. So what she is actually advocating is a radical departure from all that we have been doing all this time, which have led to this kind of multi-level and a variety of crises. A group of Russian intellectuals constituting this 2045 initiative in 2001 came out with a view, and I quote, "Today, civilization stands on the threshold of a series of global crises, anthropological, economic, political, ecological, and genetic. For the first time in history, these are crises of a planetary scale, threatening the environment where human beings live and their existence as a species. The current model for the development of society has ceased to provide an adequate response to the challenges of the times." Then two scholars came up with a book, "The End of Ethics and a Way Back: How to Fix a Fundamentally Broken Global Financial System." That is Theodore Roosevelt Malloch and Jordan Mamosky. And what they say is quite interesting. It coincides with what we feel are the, you might say, the spiritual, ethical roots of this major crisis we're going through today. It says, as private greed, you might want to add also corporate greed, institutional greed, national greed, continues to undermine the public good, a set of structural and holistic solutions for our current ethical crisis in global finance have to be introduced. It is their conviction that the problem is now systemic, with problems, quote-unquote, deeply embedded in global markets, corporate cultures, and interpersonal business dealings. And so they came up with recommendations which were designed to provide a roadmap for an essential return to ethics, return to virtue, and sustainable global economic growth, which require major changes on all fronts. And they revolve around what they say, personal responsibility and character, corporate culture, and regulatory frameworks. What I like best from my little survey of Western scholars' critique and understanding of the problem is what has been written by a professor of business law and ethics at Fordham University, Kevin Jackson. He came up with what he called the Moral Cultural Mental Model, MCMM. And his approach is in line with my own understanding of the root causes of the financial scandal. And while his arguments are not typical of intellectual analysis in mainstream American academic discourse, they deserve to be disseminated to the Muslim academic audience. So what I'm saying is, what this professor of business law and ethics is saying is in a way similar to what I would say most people who are concerned about spiritual values and integrity are also saying. Because he says, from his point of view, from this MCMM point of view, some of the causes of the crisis have to do with excessive executive compensation. The bankers, you can have a severe crisis, but the bankers will still be overpaid. And of course, banks are too big to fall, and so you have to help them. He says, neglect of moral hazard. And all these are, he says, rooted in deep-seated moral cultural tendencies of the time. And he says, most notable, the most important factors from his point of view, from this professor of business law, he says, are dehumanized economic thinking. That is, economic thinking which is no longer really concerned about human welfare, and egoistic individualism, greed, short-termism, rejection of objective moral values, and a highly speculative culture. And he says these underlying moral cultural trends cannot be simply reversed by more regulations, more laws, more controls. Instead, he said, they must be addressed by more nuanced ethical thinking and collective activity grounded in virtue. I underline that, grounded in virtue. Regard for the common good. Now this regard for the common good is one of the principles of Islamic jurisprudence, that is maslahah. And concern about maslahah, avoiding mafsada. And these are terminologies in Arabic, which means maslahah is concern about the common good. And he's talking about, you know, the common good. And respect for long-term preservation of market ecology, as well as paying greater attention to the cultivation of intangible capital assets, such as reputational and social capital. Of course, these are very vague and philosophical, but at bottom, it's really talking about moral, spiritual, ethical values that need to be put in place. So he says our thinking needs to be more sensitive to the complexity of the relationship between ethics and economics, and more attuned to the importance of trust, truth, and transparency. 3 T's. Truth, trust, transparency. Then he goes on to say, of course he is qualified to say so, I'm not qualified, but he is qualified. He says, current business ethics models are deficient for these reasons. First, they tend to be based on the idea that if it is not illegal, it is acceptable. We're quite familiar with that. Second, they fail to seriously engage moral right and wrong because of their immersion in moral relativism. And this is a disease, an intellectual, philosophical, ideological disease in the world today. Moral relativism. There's nothing absolute anymore. Everything is relative. What's right to you may not be right to me, and things change. With this kind of moral relativism, it's very difficult to really ground your ideas of change on very solid and dependable foundations. But he says all these ideas about changing the system and all that fail to seriously engage moral right and wrong because of their immersion in moral relativism. And third, these ideas are dominated by window dressing. Window dressing, not really substantial change, but just to deceive the masses. Political correctness and anti-business agendas. Then he goes on to say that, all right, I think that, okay, then I move on. Are you with me, or you have gone into deep nirvana, or? But if you are, I don't want to wake you up. Yeah, so, are you okay? All right, okay. Thank you. Because from there, I want to take you to the problem of corruption in the world. This is, of course, nothing new. But in today's world, this is really worrying. And that is, again, a manifestation of the loss of the spiritual roots, the loss of ethics at the very foundation of human structures. And therefore, corruption is so rampant. And here you have, of course, the Middle East, corruption crisis in China. The Chinese president is very, very concerned. In one statement, he says, if you don't root out the corruption, this state is going to collapse. China is going to collapse on corruption scandals. And many have been eliminated because of the corrupt practices in China. So you have the president of China, Hu Jintao, talking about the problems of corruption in China, corruption in India, corruption in Africa, and of course, not to be forgotten, corruption in the Muslim world. And I add to it, corruption and abuse of power in the Muslim world. And what you have seen over the last decade is a manifestation of this abuse of power in the Middle East, and corruption, and tyranny, and oppression, and injustice by the leaders of Muslim countries. And I came up with, just to impress upon my Muslim brothers and sisters and colleagues that we should not take lightly the problem of corruption in Muslim countries. So I have taken the data from Corruption Index from 2000 to 2014 and listing the 20 most corrupt countries in the world. And you'll find all the way, maybe almost half of those countries are Muslim countries. With the bottom with Nigeria in 2002 and 2001, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Uganda, Indonesia at the bottom, and 2002, again Bangladesh, Nigeria, Indonesia, Azerbaijan, and 2003, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Indonesia, Azerbaijan, 2004, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Chad, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Indonesia, and so on. And 2005, Chad, Bangladesh, Turkmenistan, Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, Cote d'Ivoire, Tajikistan, and others. And 2006, Iraq, Guinea, Sudan, Chad, Bangladesh, Uzbekistan, and so on. And 2007, Somalia, Iraq, Uzbekistan, Sudan. 2008, yeah, maybe 2008, Cambodia is down there. Venezuela, Sierra Leone, Guinea-Bissau, these are non-Muslim countries, and then 180, Somalia. Somalia has been championing the lowest standards of integrity so far.